Welcome back, guys. Today's video is a little bit different. I've had a few requests for some more background information on the Camaro, the turbo Camaro. Alright, as far as the Camaro goes, it's a 94 Z28 6-speed car originally, T-top car, until I order a carbon roof, that is. It's got 138,000 miles, I think, on the odometer, so she's had a good life. I think I bought it around 100,000, so I've put my fair share of abuse on it. It's been a great car. I've had a lot of memories. I used to daily drive that car. I had the car painted back in 2005, like an Admiral Blue. I think it was a 05 GM production color at the time. I can't ever seem to find the paint code. But I had it repainted, probably my favorite color, and been super happy with it. Put the SS badges and a VFN SS hood on it, just because I always loved the way the SS's looked. I even had SS wheels for a short time until I started putting drag wheels on it, and then I narrowed the rear end, changed the back spacing so the factory wheels obviously wouldn't fit. It's got a Scoggin Dickey 5.3. I think it's a 329 cubic inch. I think it's just 5/5.3. It's got a BTR turbo stage 2 cam. Little John helped me spec that out. Now it has a Jose S494 Gen 3 turbo with a billet wheel. What heads? TEA, TFS heads. They're LS1. It's got a BTR intake. The car runs on E85. I've got flex fuel. It's got a nasty performance fuel tank with an Airmotive 5-gallon pump, 10A inlines, Bosch 210 injectors. Let's see, the headers. That's probably the biggest question I get on the headers. What brand headers? I was looking for something that was really high up, real tall next to the spark plug. That way I had room to run a 5-inch downpipe underneath. So I ended up going with a set of stainless header. They're LS log manifolds is essentially what they are. They look kind of a lot like a regular LS truck manifold, just a little bit more compact and all stainless instead of cast iron. Streetcar Joe built the turbo kit. Well, I cut and built most of the kit. Obviously, he had to weld everything. My welding skills aren't up to par for that, but so it's got a homemade turbo kit, towel wastegates, precision blow-off valve, 4-inch cold side, 5-inch downpipe. Let's see, transmission is a BTE Power Glide with a 1.8 first gear ratio. It does have a gear vendors, so it is kind of a 3-speed transmission with third gear being 0.75. That's the same ratio as what a manual transmission came in that car in 5th gear would have been. So it helps on the highway with drag week for sure. Just drop the RPMs a little bit more, let us run a little faster down the highway. Carbon fiber drive shaft from, I think it's PST out in Florida. It's got a Burkhart 9-inch rear end chromoly housing to save some weight. Everything on the car I tried to save weight. Carbon fiber this, chromoly that. It's got a 10-point chromoly cage. A lot of the suspension is Madman Racing. He used to build a lot of fast F bodies back in the 04-05 time frame. He still builds a lot of fast cars, but I think that was back in the heyday when everybody seemed to own an F body. So it's got Madman rear suspension back there. It's got strange brakes all the way around. I just recently upgraded the front suspension and K-member from just a standard BMR K-member to a turbo K-member to allow for more room for the turbo kit. Upgraded the upper and lower A-arms to Burkhart's lightweight drag race spherical Heim joint stuff. I was having some binding issues and it was tough to get the alignment where I wanted it for drag racing. So I'm really happy I upgraded that. That seems to have made a difference. Wheels, it's got Alumastars all the way around, kind of like Grub Worm, the white Camaro, the exact same wheels. Double bead locks, 15x10 in the back, 5.5 backspace. The rear end's been narrowed 3 inches per side It's got Mosier 35 spline axles. Those axles have been around since 2005. So that's kind of cool that they're still on the car. I've still been able to use them from rear end to rear end. Interior, it's got factory carpet. I bought some factory carpet a few years back before they discontinued it. Bought a new dash pad because those always seem to break. It's got a Holley Dominator system on it with a ton of sensors. Got a bunch of Rife sensors so we can monitor everything on drag week, and if there's problems we can diagnose a little better. I put EGTs on it this last winter to make sure we could view that data. Joe mentioned that it was very useful at the track to diagnose which cylinder. Really easy to look at the EGTs. So you don't really need a lot of sensors when everything's going great. You need the sensors when you're having problems or when you blow up a motor and you're trying to go back and figure out what caused it. Motors don't blow up. There's always something that contributes to why they came apart. So talked about the roll cage. It's a Wolf Racecraft 10-point cage. It's certified. It's old. I think some of the bars are 1 3/4, where I think most of the new stuff is all 1 5/8. It is chromoly, but for whatever reason, the door bars and stuff, they're the 1 3/4. They are swing out door bars, so it's nice when I'm working on the car. I can rip the seats out, pull the door bars out of the way, and hop underneath the dash and get to whatever I'm trying to get to. Here recently, in the last 6 months, I've put onboard air with an air compressor and a larger aluminum tank. Instead of running like CO2, I was running compressed air because it's lighter weight with some carbon fiber paintball bottles. That was kind of an idea that I took over from the nitrous Corvette. It had carbon fiber bottles and nano kits on it. It was really big on trying to save weight, so I was kind of doing the same thing with this, but always having to fill bottles was getting old. I still felt like a nitrous car to me. So it's got onboard air. It's got a Braille lithium carbon battery. Put carbon fiber NACA ducts in it. It's got derail high flow coolers for the transmission, for the oil. It's just got a cheap Summit radiator. I think it's just their house brand. It's nothing crazy. It's got a Messier water pump that's been welded to the radiator. That has the 2 outlets to a 417 Motorsports coolant block. That works really well. It kind of cleaned it up. I used to have 2 inlets, 2 outlets, and there was just hoses everywhere. So right now I've got 2 inlets and just 1 large outlet back to the radiator. I put some big, I think 11-inch, 12-inch spall fans with a custom radiator shroud last year before drag week. That made a huge difference while towing with the trailer. When you get off the highway, the car will actually drop 5 to 10 degrees sitting at a traffic light, as opposed to already being heat soaked and just getting hotter and hotter. So the fans made a world of difference. There's not a whole lot of airflow on those cars. I didn't cut the nose like a lot of guys do, especially on the LS cars, especially the Camaros, to let fresh air into the radiator. Scoops the air up. So I'm just using that, and it seems to work great. So I'm going to continue using that. I added some race louvers. Racelouvers.com, some hood louvers to the car here a few weeks ago, and that made a difference on drag week as well. All my temps were probably the lowest that I know of compared to a lot of my buddies, and I think I have the biggest enclosed trailer with a 4x8, 4 foot tall little mini trailer. So I was really happy that the car did great and stayed together. The rear end gears were 350. I wanted to put kind of a low gear for drag week so I could try to run 65, 70 miles an hour. I figured at a 1,000-mile trip, doing 60 miles an hour, it's going to take a lot longer than doing 70 miles an hour. So I was kind of planning more so for the drivability, highway function, not so much the performance of the car. And we've been struggling with the 60-foot here lately. So I bought some 370 gears. I've got those. I've got a spare center section that already has 389 gears ready to go. I had that in the car when I first built it, but that's really what Joe was running for 8th mile. So no way would that have worked for quarter-mile racing or drag week, at least for what I wanted to do. So I pulled those out and set it aside for a rainy day. I've got a VFN rear hatch, fiberglass hatch, some Lexan for the rear, and I just ordered a Racecraft rear wing, so I'll be putting that on the car to try to save 50 or so pounds off the back. The gear vendors adds about 50 pounds, so it's a fair amount of work to take that back out of the car. It's the short stubby version that only makes the total transmission length 3 inches longer. It's great, it's compact, but you basically have to start with a short dragster transmission, Powerglide transmission, not the standard short tail transmission that you can find kind of all over the place. So if I want to convert it, I've either got to take it all the way apart, or I've got to have a spare dragster Powerglide, and I don't have one of those yet. So I would love to have a spare, but maybe one day. But I think it'll run 7. It's kind of just changing a few things and just putting forth some effort and dial in the suspension and pour the coals to it. It did have a PTE converter, and a lot of guys were having great success and luck with Hughes back when Pete was over there with that company. And so I switched to their badass bolt together aluminum front covered torque converter. I haven't changed stators. I think it's got an 1835 stator in it right now, and I think Joe was saying it's a little on the tight side, but with me changing the rear end gears and taking a little weight out of it, it's going to change itself again. So we'll just take it out, do some testing, and see maybe what changes we're going to have to make. I know we're going to need a different stator when we go to Colorado and run Rocky Mountain 1.0. Up there at altitude, the car is going to struggle to make some power. We've actually been to Pueblo in Joe's car, and the car, man, really had a hard time making boost with a supercharged car. So I'm expecting a whole nother set of obstacles at that race. Your standard 275 Mickey rear tire that everybody's running. It's a radial. I bought a few titanium bolts and studs. It's got titanium rear wheel studs. That helps save some weight. It's kind of the bigger bang for the buck when it comes to titanium. Factory firewall, obviously factory front end. I haven't cut any of the front frame rails. I tried to leave it pretty well stock. I know a lot of the True Street rules or daily rules kind of required that, so I tried to leave it. I didn't want to do something crazy like a hood exit and all of a sudden the car's got to run in the outlaw class against some higher caliber cars. I started off with a smaller turbo, so I didn't really want to limit myself by forcing the car into a more competitive class. So I tried to take some of that stuff into consideration when I built it, and because of it, everything is really tight in the engine bay. I would love to do a rock solid tube front end and cut the cowl, make it a little bit easier to work on and service, as well as get rid of some weight. Before the car was featured in GM High Tech back in 2010, the March issue of 2010, we raced the LT1 Shootout. The year before, it was the #1 qualifier and winner, and then the second year, the year that it had its pictures taken for the magazine, I had engine issues, last minute thrash. Got the car together. There was a mechanical pickup, crank trigger issue where the bracket came loose and slid down, and the physical timing wasn't that. The computer still thought it was getting 20 degrees of timing at idle, and it really wasn't. So the car sat in the pits, broke, but it was a #1 qualifier before it started having issues, so that was really cool. I've got a lot of memories with the editor and the photographer with GM High Tech taking those. I think that company's been out of business for quite some time, but still pretty cool for a car guy to get his car featured in a magazine. The only thing better is probably on the cover of a magazine, so maybe one day. But right before that, like I said, I was messing with the engine. I had the engine bay painted, pulled the engine out, had it painted and clear coated so it matches, so it looks really presentable. The blue car with the black factory engine bay just kind of stood out and wasn't my liking. So I upgraded that. Had a buddy of mine, good buddy, that painted the car come by, and he painted the engine bay. He's also the guy that painted the race louvers for me the other day, and he's already volunteered to paint the rear hatch for me as well. So he sure takes care of me when it comes to that. So it's always nice knowing people. You meet a lot of different people in this racing community that come from different backgrounds, different jobs, and everybody's usually pretty willing to help out and lend a hand as long as you're a nice person with good morals and values. and you're willing to do the same. So it's nice to have buddies. Great memories to look back on for sure. For drag week, the car weighed 3460 with me in it. A little heavier than what she's ever been with all the extra coolers and stuff, but still it's not 36 or 37. I would love for it to be closer to 32, but maybe one of these days throw some carbon doors on it. Like I said, it's got factory carpet interior, so that could be lighter, but as far as sound deadening and heat from Rocky Mountain Race Week, I'll just leave that stuff. I like the way it looks. It's got a radio. I've got 4 speakers in it. It's kind of hard to hear over the exhaust, but it's sitting in the lanes. It's still nice to listen to jam out to the radio in it. Factory door panels. I would love to put some carbon door panels in it, but it's hard because I'm so used to the car, the way it sits in street mode. Everything just looks good. It's still got the factory dash, with the exception of the Holley Dominator. The cluster is swapped out for their 7-inch dash. See what else. I think it's a B&M Pro Bandit shifter, air shifter. It's got Kirky race seats. Aeromotive regulator. Earl's Ultra Pro fuel hose on everything. It's got a lot of motion parts on the car. It's got motion, dual catch cans, transmission can, ton of Rife sensors, fuel temp, oil temp, trans temp, transmission pressures, those are Rife. Motion cells and alternator kit for an F-body. Kind of puts it in the factory location. I think it's actually manufactured by an Australian company, but it works great. My old bracket flexed a ton. This one was amazing. ATI dampener. I actually built the turbo kit around a Waterman Mini Bertha fuel pump and air and motion fuel pump bracket and pulley. So when I go to methanol, at least the turbo kit doesn't have to change. Everything's already clearanced and built around that. I'd like to switch that over. It's going to be a little tight to do it this year if we're still trying to hit Rocky Mountain Race Week next year. I've got a lot of other stuff going on, other cars, sport bikes. So I've got my hands full. I stay pretty busy. I'm doing an engine swap right now on a buddy's Camaro. So I typically always have the toolbox open. It's fun. So I used to work on a lot of people's cars. I used to rebuild transmissions. I think I've rebuilt about 30 manual transmissions over the years. So that's a lot of fun. Learned that job for 2 30-packs of beer from a buddy at the dealership years and years ago. So education sometimes is expensive and sometimes it's cheap. In that case, it was cheap and it paid off for years and years. So, but no, the car is probably my pride and joy. I really have had a lot of fun, a lot of memories with it over the last 19 years, give or take. To me, it still kind of feels like the same car when I was 16 years old from high school, the first car, because obviously it's still practically the same, 94 black on black. But lots of memories, lots of good times. I'd like to do a carbon roof, save some weight, get rid of the gear vendors just for some purpose racing and record setting time stuff. For drag week, obviously, that'll have to stay. I'd like to cut the cowl. I'd like to tube the front end, pull some weight out of it. Just kind of make it more into a race car. So just do what you can when you can. But anyway, that's my Camaro in a nutshell. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed that. If you have any more additional questions, I think I was fairly thorough, with the exception of maybe the actual engine specs. But if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out, leave something in the comments. I'll get back to you guys. I'm a pretty open book. I'll share almost everything. So if you've got anything on your mind, feel free to ask. All right. Well, see you guys on the next one. Stay safe.